Man, you guys in the West Village here. Are we in West Village? Is that where we are?
We are in the West Village.
I was in the restaurant with the IRS guy, and that restaurateur, I've never seen this, came over to me, I don't know if you saw this, and he tried to take my phone from me.
No way.
He definitely recognized me. He didn't want to say my name. It's like Voldemort. No one wants to say my name. They can't say the name. They hate me, but they can't say the name. It's a whole psychological thing. It's got to be a spiritual thing.
It is a spiritual thing. Of course, it is a spiritual thing. Of course, it's a spiritual thing. That's exactly right.
Perfect.
Okay. So there's no strike. We're already filming.
Sounds good.
So, you have been in journalism, and I think one of the craziest things about your story, as we've talked, like you're an actor, like you're a stage guy, like that's a deep part of your heart, and just the story of going from that part, which is like performance, to being this guy that's fighting for America against Pfizer and Engoron, and like, how does that journey happen?
Well, I think a storyteller. I think that's it's like a Venn diagram. There's a thespian in you, there's a passion for justice in you, but you don't really think about the secondary effects of all the risks and the danger and the fear. That's really not a focal point. It's more so to get the story, to get the visual, and it's almost like you're looking at the world through a lens, and you're doing first-person observation.
Did you do that as a kid? Do you remember like being drawn to the story? Did your parents read you books? I mean, how did it? Yeah.
It was first of all, I saw Little Shop of Horrors when I was 15.
I've never seen it.
And it was a high school stage production, and I was completely amazed by the protagonist and how talented he was.
In the stage version?
In the high school stage version.
Yeah. And you were not in that?
No, but I was in awe.
Yeah.
I wanted to be up there and perform. That was 1990.
The monster eating?
Yes.
Is that what it is?
Well,
the protagonist, the gardener, or the monster?
The protagonist was Seymour.
Okay, the gardener.
The guy, the Rick Moranis character, if you will. And then I watched a lot of local TV in my childhood bedroom, local Fox 5 News, Rosanna Scotto, and I read the newspaper a lot.
And right here in New Jersey?
Right in Bergen County. So we got all the New York City media.
Yeah.
And this is before, they had the tower, the antenna on the top of the World Trade Center, so you could get 2, 4, 5, and 7 on your box. And I read the newspaper, and I was very passionate when I read the newspaper. I was almost like contemptuous. Well, that's not the way the world really is. Someone needs to tell the real story.
Yeah. And did your parents help you see that, or you just saw that?
I remember not really. I remember the Clinton impeachment. I recall that.
Yep.
And I was in like 1999.
Yep.
That was my first political thought. And then I remember reading Animal Farm by George Orwell. That really affected me.
Yeah.
Animal Farm. All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. And I didn't even understand the Soviet Union or anything.
So of course not.
But I read that book, and that really affected me.
It's my son Leon's favorite book, my 15-year-old son. That they changed the rules, the injustice of changing the rules, and the animals were like, we just kind of like move on with life. It's like it's like COVID stuff in New York City, the amnesia of the left. It's like, remember you guys were all kicking us out of restaurants 5 minutes ago? We weren't even allowed to eat in your places. It's like, nah, we forgot.
And there's a lot of power in that statement. All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. Words cease to have meaning. Justice no longer applies. And there's just so much power in that. I remember my ninth grade, I read a lot of American literature. 10th grade, I read Grapes of Wrath and Scarlet Letter. And it was, I suppose and then 9/11 happened my senior year of high school, and I went to college, and all I did all day my freshman year at Rutgers was read the New York Times front to back in the dining
So
hall.
what year was that? What year did you go to college?
2000, and I entered 2002.
Okay, so I was just a little bit before you, but I think for me, that time frame at normal colleges around America, there was like the poison was really beginning to spread. Now it's insanity on universities.
Now it's insanity, yeah.
But then it was really subtle, and I was like, I don't know what to believe about politics.
Yeah. It was like I did this stunt where I tried to ban Lucky Charms, and that was funny back then, but now it's no longer ironic.
Yeah, right.
That's just what people do. Everything's racist.
Yeah, I'm surprised we haven't. But the Irish are not. They're not a protected class.
Well, in New York City, they said Irish need not apply 110 years ago. It was like the N-word was used against the Irish. That would be my great grandparents.
Yeah.
But I was in college, and I read the newspaper every day. Very, very, very passionate.
That, which is odd, just FYI.
Very, I was
right?
kind of a loner.
That was odd, yeah.
It was odd.
Yeah.
I probably spent 2 hours a day doing nothing but reading the newspaper.
Yeah, I mean, that shows obviously a passion, a proclivity, all of those kind of things.
And also a introversion.
Yeah.
So I was really introverted.
Which is so weird, right? Because there's an introversion side and then there's the stage side, kind of balancing each other out in a sense.
Well, like Harrison Ford is, as an actor, is the same way.
I've heard that.
If he gets on the camera, he glows, and if you talk to him normally, he's pretty docile.
Yeah, yeah.
But I was reading the paper all day long, and I started a column, and I started writing for the daily Rutgers newspaper. It was called the Targum. Remember, it's 50,000 people go to Rutgers, massive university, and you can feel quite lonely in a university that big.
Yeah.
And I wrote for the Targum, and then I started my own newspaper when I was 19.
I had 0 friends in college. I had 1 friend in college, and I went to Portland State University.
You went to where?
Portland State University in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, Portland. I didn't know that about you. Portland,
I
Oregon.
lived out on the West Coast for about 10 years. And yeah, I had no friends. I didn't know how to make a friend. I was so desperately insecure, I didn't know how to say hi to somebody. But like, if you want to live in New York City and do business here, you have to learn how to talk to people. Like, you have to learn how to engage people. You know, which is so funny, right? It's like there's this insecurity thing, and then you're chasing the guy down the street.
Yes.
You know, there's like that balance.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was thinking about that as I was coming here, because I figure you'd bring that up. I forced myself to do that. The chase down the street or confront.
Yes.
That was an act of will.
Yes, yes.
I was so scared. So, I mean, I still sometimes like the judge this week, the New York judge in Long Island.
in Gorin.
I remember thinking, oh, this is really uncomfortable. I don't want to do this. I saw him through the glass. You can post it in your post-production. There's a shot of the judge. That's the goofy judge that ruled against Trump, $350 million. Goofy guy.
I litigated before him.
Is that right?
I had some of a story. I'll tell you that in a minute.
I've heard so many stories in the last 24 hours. Everybody has ran an encounter with this judge.
Yes, yeah.
I've had 10 DMs of women who've unfortunately went on a date with him.
No way.
100%.
Wow.
Apparently one woman was in a divorce case, and he was the clerk in 1979, and he hit on her, and he was in the case. So this guy has a penchant for creeping on a lot of girls. So anyways, what was I talking about?
After we do this, I got a long story to tell you about Engorin.
Everyone has a story
I
about
know.
this
Okay,
guy.
so you saw him in the glass.
I force myself to do these things. It's an act of will. And over time, it's like a muscle. You exercise this act of will. In the beginning, it was like big gulp, big deep breath.
Sick to your stomach.
Let's go.
Yeah,
And
totally.
you take the walk towards the professor with the camera. Hello, sir. Your door is covered in propaganda. What do you have to say for yourself? You force yourself. Now, is that acting? Not quite, because it's not pretend.
Right.
It's real
That's
life.
real.
There's no safety net. There's no person that says cut. I remember that feeling walking up to my history professor, 2004. This is before Twitter, before YouTube. Remember, YouTube didn't come into existence until 2005. It was a different world. I say that as a millennial, but I feel like we're living in a different generation now.
Now, I mean, so you're doing it in 2004. What were you going to do with the tape? Like, what was the plan?
Didn't think that far ahead. didn't think that far ahead. It was one foot in front of the other. And this is a website. It was called the Rutgers Centurion. And we had a Kodak digital camera with a little video option. Didn't do too bad of a job. Had an SD chip, just like modern day. And we put the video on the website in a QuickTime player, and we distributed our monthly magazine, and we handed it out for free, like pamphlets, putting them in stacks. And that was my beginning.
Yeah, that's cool. There's something about like the act of the will and integrity and virtue that's, I mean, we've hung out, I've heard you talk about it, like it's, you know the value of it. Like to say, I will do this thing because it's right to do it, even though I hate it and I don't want to do it and I want to run away. Like, and that pain is there. And I think a lot of us on our team Charlie, our friends have stood up for stuff and have had to be in those moments where you're like, this separates the men from the boys, the people that stand up and have virtue. How did that develop inside of you? Because that's also a rare thing.
It's a psychological question. I feel like as a journalist, I often become a psychologist because well, before I answer that question, I feel like action is so important. The action, that's what separates the winners from the losers. You just got to get up and go do it.
Yes.
I don't know what makes someone that way. Is it God? Is it your upbringing? Is it nature, nurture? I suppose as a young kid, my father was I told you he like renovated homes, and
Yeah.
I was forced to do this work I didn't like doing, like everything, construction and lawn mowing and painting and plumbing, and I hated it, but I was forced. Maybe that has something to do with it, but I just remember actually feeling that's wrong that these professors are admiring the Soviet Union when there was all this death and destruction.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that's wrong, and someone ought to do something about that. So I need to go confront this guy, but I hate doing that.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do it anyway
Yeah.
because it needs to be done.
Yeah, you know what's funny? Like, we know this, James. Like, there's so many guys grifting right now, and they're like, they do it because it gets eyeballs. Like, you can't say James O'Keefe does this to get eyeballs when you were doing this pre-eyeballs, in the sense of like, you know what I mean? It's like pre-TikTok.
There were no eyeballs.
Viral, exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, a lot of people project that their own insecurities on you.
Yeah, exactly. I like it. I think the other virtue thing is I also think you have a sense of God and knowing God, and I think you understand the value of virtue, which in the West, virtue comes from saying there's a moral law and it's firm. It's not relativity. You can't believe whatever you want.
Yeah, truth is not determined by a majority vote. And in media, again, good point on pre-eyeballs, or I suppose when you're pamphleteering, there are eyeballs in a different way, but in the internet, it's like millions and millions and millions. I think what it was in terms of virtue was people in my line of work, especially for the first decade, the amount of attacks from the people who buy ink by the barrel, like
Yep.
the New York Times
Yep.
and the Wikipedia. Wikipedia is horrible. You get so viciously and savagely attacked that if you're driven by what people think of you, you won't do this. Because they, you know who they are,
Yep.
control the power of perception and persuasion. Now that's changing, I think,
It's changing.
David,
That's
a
changing.
lot.
That's changing.
I don't know if we're at the tipping point yet, but we're
not.
We're somewhere.
There's momentum.
There's something happening where people don't really care about the New York Times anymore.
Well, this is what some of the conservatives that are libertarians that are on our side are like. I keep wanting to say to them, you guys, your relativity destroyed all your organizations. It's like organizations are on a death spiral. They don't know they're on a death spiral, but the ideology itself is suicidal. It always consumes itself. It's like, who's the guy, Weinstein, who is at Evergreen College in Seattle area? Like, I'm like, bro, atheism, which equals relativity, relativism, moral relativism, creates people desperate for a moral structure, and then they create this pathological one based upon Marxism, and then they want to consume you. You have to believe in virtue and truth and solid things underpinning the universe, including morals. Anyway, that's one of my...
I think you're right. I think it does come from God, maybe perhaps at sometimes unbeknownst to me. But it has to, and I think that what Trump, I've heard it, this isn't my thought, I heard someone else say this, Trump is being targeted and attacked by every force, the judge in New York, Letitia James. If you look at her eyes in the courtroom, it looks like she's almost in love with him. Yeah. She's obsessive, compulsively focused on him. Yeah. She ran for election to target a man.
Yeah, there's a dark intoxication.
Which is the opposite of justice, regardless of whether he's innocent or guilty. You don't run for election as Attorney General to target somebody. That's
I keep telling people, like, don't you think that's a violation of due process? You're not treating everyone the same under the laws. Right. You're saying, I'm going to spend, she spent, I think, 6 years. 6 years, fraud claim. Fraudulent misrepresentation, here are the elements. Someone lied, there was reliance on the lie, and there were damages. So like someone lied, he's like, my house is worth $1 million. I'm like, I think my house is worth $10 million. Is that even a lie in a commercial real estate setting? Second, reliance. The bank didn't rely on it, they sent their own auditors. Third, damages. They said, the bank itself said there were no damages.
Yeah.
So it's like, this is one of the most insane cases I've ever seen before.
Yes.
Speaking of which, and Goran, let's jump back to that.
Goran, well, he was, I got a tip. This is this week, as of this filming. What day is it? Thursday. Gosh, I got a tip on, I think, Monday afternoon. And I needed to confirm that, does the judge work out at Equinox? Yes. What time? 5:30. I called another source just to confirm. Is that 5:30 p.m. a.m.? A.m. Okay. And the next morning at 4 a.m. I drove to Great Neck.
What Equinox was it?
Equinox in Long Island, Great Neck, New York, which is
got it.
just east of the city. And I get there and I walk in the gym, and again, this is one of those ones where, speaking of spirituality, which you're an expert on this, I've done so many of these. I've done thousands of these undercover sort of operations, investigations. But this one, it felt very spiritually dark inside the place. I felt like I was behind enemy lines. I felt like everyone was looking at me. And I'm a guy who's pretty cavalier. I don't really worry about what people think. But I remember feeling there's a lot of people protecting that judge here, shaking his hand. And I willed myself to go in there and talk to him. And what's remarkable about this one, David, is granted I didn't get any Pentagon papers here, but I did get a couple people. So many people now are messaging me saying, "Oh, I wish I was in the gym. I would have elicited him and got more." People are starting to get my vision of maybe they can do it too.
Well, that's what you want to do.
That's what
you
I
want
do.
citizen journalists.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Yes, yeah. Have you talked about that? Have you talked about that on interviews and I know on your show, on your Twitter show you have.
Few people, I'm trying to get people to do what I do, but the problem has been that people are either afraid or unable due to life circumstances.
What's the key?
What's the key to doing it?
Yes.
You have to be fearless. You have to be available. Most people are unavailable, and if they, to the extent they want to participate in something, they want to do it from their couch. They want to work from home. You can't. It's not a thing. You can't. You can't go undercover in various dangerous places from your couch.
Yeah, right now. It's
you have to be not for sale, and you have to be talented. So fearless. You got to go there. You got to be not for sale and talented. Put all those variables into a computer.
Yeah, right.
And find out how many people are spit out. It's a small fraction of people.
Sure. I think the other thing that I've found when doing scary things, it's like you plan a time and you have a couple of people meet you, like somebody with the camera, because then now you have to go, or else you look like a coward in front of your friend. So we do our church evangelizes, and so we tell God's story, which I think is a very compelling story. Heaven, hell, angels, dragons, like the whole cool, I think it's cool, symbolic and beautiful and real and not symbolic and all of the things. Anyway, so I started doing in the subways a couple of years ago.
Wow, that is scary.
I'll tell you what's scary. On the subway, on the car, doors close, and I say, I don't want anybody money, I have this crazy story. Here's how it goes. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He made an incredible garden.
Wow.
He's amazing. He put humans in a garden. That's how the story starts. It doesn't start, you're a bad person, you're evil, and you're terrible. It starts with God making an insane garden and making these incredible people that he wants to know. And that's just getting up and saying, it sounds cool, you and I sitting here. It's not, it doesn't feel cool on the subway.
How do people respond?
Left and right, it's New York. Like scowls, mocking laughter, and some people would be like, "Oh yeah, every single train car." People would clap, little old ladies, or people would get off the train just to talk with me. So always both responses.
And you must feel a little nervous doing that. Your heart
it's terrifying.
beats a little faster.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, I would say that's precisely even though you're not wearing a hidden camera and talking to some evil dude,
right?
It's the same
it's
exact
the same exact
process.
experience, exactly.
In fact, I would even say that might be, I'd be more difficult for me to do that than talk to the judge.
In Manhattan, it's not fun. Maybe in the South it'd have been easier.
Well, there's an element of recording, and there's an element of added legal risk to what I do. But I would say psychologically, that's what you do.
And we've recorded it a couple of times, but the subway we generally haven't. Just like that's anyway. Okay, so. I'm just going to tell the Engelhardt story to you because we're hanging out.
Sounds good.
So in 2015, I have a case right before Christmas time, and it's my only client because I don't know how to run a business. I don't know how to get clients at that time in my life, and this lady's pretty crazy. And I have her in front of Engelhardt bench trial, and she keeps getting up and yelling. And I'm like, if you don't sit down and shut up, I'm going to walk out of the courtroom right now to my client. And then 5 minutes later, she'll get up and yell. I'm like, it's just, I couldn't control it. This crazy Chinese lady. And I kind of loved her and I kind of hated her. It was one of those. But I litigated the soul out of that case.
Wow.
Like I was on fire. And I think we had the facts and the law on our side. And I think the appellate record shows that. And Gordon does the judgment after a couple of days of trial, comes out and he's like, judgment against my client. Everybody leave. Mr. Engelhardt, will you come up here? I walk up to the bench. He says, you're a really great lawyer, but I just didn't believe your client, so never represent a client like that again. And then that's it.
Wow.
And so even though and I think the appeals record shows this, the fact, because his judgment got overturned, the facts were on my side and the law was on my side. He just didn't feel like he liked her.
Didn't feel like he liked her.
Same thing with Trump. It's like the facts aren't there, the law's not there. He just feels like he doesn't like the guy.
Feeling.
Exactly right. Back to relativism.
Relativity, moral relativism.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, there's a great book called The Closing of the American Mind by Alan Bloom, and I also read this book in college, and it was like written in like 1987, and it said and this is in the 80s, this is a different world compared to obviously now, but the line was, when a student enters university, there's only two things they know: that truth is relative and that Richard Nixon is evil. So you could replace Nixon with Trump.
Totally, 100%.
But truth is relative and Trump is evil.
That's right.
Those are the only two absolute. Those are the only two things when you enter college that you're taught. So, of course, you know, we talk about truth and veritas, which is the name of was a motto of my newspaper in college. And veritas vos liberabit, the truth shall set you free. Veritas vos liberabit. And
was that a Boondock Saints kind of? Were you feeling Boondock
No,
Saints?
I was inspired by what did I say? I went to Harvard to sing as part of the men's glee club at Rutgers, and their motto was Veritas. And the Harvard Classics editions had Veritas. I didn't see the Boondock Saints movie until like 5 years ago. I didn't know they had tattooed on their knuckles.
Veritas,
Veritas.
Yeah.
So is Veritas, the truth shall set you free. The truth is self-evident. The truth is like a lion. You just, St. Augustine said, you just let it out and it'll fulfill itself. That's very central to my vision, which if you look at journalism today, what is the problem with journalism? Everything's inverted. People are on television yapping away about what they think.
Right.
Journalists shouldn't tell you what they think.
Right, exactly.
No more than the judge should tell you what he thinks.
Exactly right.
Journalists should say, I have no comment, and here are the facts. It's the exact opposite. And the journalist is often quoting the person in the government and parroting what the person tells them, when the journalist ought to be skeptical of the person in the government. So everything's
100%
inverted.
correct. So I don't know if you know about this classical model education, how we used to teach from the founding of our nation till through about the 50s. They had this thing called the trivium, which means 3 roads. And the first road was the grammatical stage. You teach a little kid, it's parroting. You just say what I tell you to say. The sky is blue, like the grass is green, this is a tree, you are a boy, she is a girl. And they do that until they hit about 12, and then they move to the second stage, which is rhetoric and dialectic. Now that I told you the facts, now I'm going to tell you how to use logic to defend the facts. And then third and last stage is the poetic stage, which is art and taking dialectic and rhetoric and using it through art and form. Once you know truth, you can repeat the world. It's like we literally have it upside down. It's like, let's start with art. How do you feel? How does this make you feel? Are you a boy? Are you a girl? It's like the breaking of the mind, so you can't then have a critical mind to analyze the world, so then you're just ruled by the tyrant.
By feelings.
Exactly.
Yeah. I see that in an employer context, actually. That has nothing to do with philosophy or truth or wisdom or God, but everything has to do with God. But I see that in employees, young people. They care more about feelings. It's like, I'm almost 40, and perhaps my generation and the older are driven by a desire to, like, I'll work a weekend if you give me a 20% raise, I'll work weekends. Young kids don't care about that. They just want to be made to feel good, which is not my style. I'm not there to make you feel good.
And they don't know that actually virtue makes you feel good, and pursuing what feels good leads to depression and death.
Virtue makes you feel good.
Virtue makes you later feel good. You're like, I just worked as hard as I could and I feel amazing.
Right.
Like, but that's like 18 hours later or 2 weeks later or whatever it is. You know, I sacrificed
So what has changed?
Well, I mean, I think we have literally zero. The church is supposed to be the counselor to the state. We have zero moral guidance. Zero. And the moral guidance we have is like, you know, it's like drag queen story hour. It's disastrous, upside down. It's like, you know, it's like walking in the upside down world of what is that Netflix show, right? And it's like the monsters.
Stranger Things.
Yeah, and it's like the drag queens or the monsters out trying to eat you as a little kid.
I have a quick story on that. When I was in high school, there were a couple gay people, in my class, and I went back to my high school school board meeting. Not as James O'Keefe, the journalist, but just as a citizen of Westwood, New Jersey.
Yeah.
And to my shock, I mean, half of this auditorium was filled with pride flags, and there were dudes literally in dresses with a beard, no effort, they just put on a dress. I thought it was a joke. I thought they were playing Halloween.
It's not.
And it's half of the place. And I thought,
correct.
This is not the world I grew up in, and I started to feel old. I started to feel like we're entering a different world now.
Yeah, so I wrote a book. We can talk about this for hours, but what I want to say about that, just very briefly, is like when the fire leaves the fireplace, it consumes the whole house. So fire is really beautiful and incredible in its setting. So it's like sexuality and sex is insanely great in the right setting that God put it in. It's like, now we're just going to throw it on the floor and see what happens. And it spreads. It's a natural force. Will Durant, who's actually atheist, classical historian, Will Durant said, sexuality is a fire that must be bedded and boarded on every bank lest it consume both the individual and the society. And he knew it's a natural impulse that needs a moral guidance system, or else it just spills over to everywhere.
It reminds me of the quote by C.S. Lewis, I think it was in The Four Loves, where you have guardrails on a road.
Yes.
You have to have those guardrails.
Totally.
Or you're going to go over, and it affects every man, sexual lusts and urges.
Exactly.
But these sorts of things with people in dresses and chopping off private parts.
Yep.
It's,
and the insanity of it right now.
It's just, I don't understand it psychologically, and I don't know what causes someone to do that. I don't know if that's abuse in your childhood or trauma. Or...
Do you know who Mark Driscoll is?
No.
I was hanging out with James Lindsay last night, and this guy Mark Driscoll, he's a pastor, kind of famous guy. Anyway, he said, you know, demons. He's talking to Lindsay. He's like, you know, demons are genderless and they're gender fluid. They go into either both males and females. They switch their gender, and they use phrases like they, them. If you remember when Jesus is talking to Legion, we are many. They're using gender neutral language. They change their gender. I mean, it's like if you look at evil things, it parallels that kind of evil. And is there a construct for it? Yes, and we can talk for a long time about that. But you're an evil warrior. You fight evil, and one of your first fights was dressing up as a pimp.
Yeah.
and exposing what happened. Tell me that story.
It's a long story, but I'll tell you the 60-second version, and you can dive into whichever part of it you want. I get these people that message me, and at the time, I said, I do this to this day.
But you were like 21 at the time?
I was 24.
Okay.
This is 2009.
Yeah.
Obama was just gotten to the presidency. President Obama was an attorney for a group called ACORN, which was a housing loan assistance group, received a couple $100 million in federal money. So we decided to put them to the test because they were breaking the law, squatting foreclosed homes. They were doing things that were illicit. So we thought it would be creative to go in there and say, hey, we're a pimp, and I've got my prostitutes, and we're starting a brothel. And to make it even more sinister, we said with our hidden camera rolling that we had underage prostitutes. And I thought they were going to throw me out or maybe give me some advice, but they took it hook, line, and sinker. They were telling me how to use my tax forms to list the underage girls in a certain way to save money. They were trying to help me evade the authorities. They were very unscrupulous people. And I had a camera in my tie, and I had a Huggy Bear fur coat. If you look at me, I look like a 1970s sort of blaxploitation pimp.
Right.
And it became a cause. It was on the Daily Show at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It made South Park, front page, New York Post, 2 days in a row. And this was a different world. This is 2009.
Yeah.
So these videos come out, became a national sensation. I can't exaggerate just how much of a sensation. I mean, it was on CNN. It was. Now they can't say my name. I'm Voldemort. But
right.
This was when no one even knew who I was, and Andrew Breitbart was still alive. He was the guy that worked with Matt Drudge Report, and Congress voted to defund ACORN a week after the videos.
Wow.
And then the Senate, which was democratically controlled, signed legislation 83-7 in the U.S. Senate, and then Obama signed a bill defunding ACORN.
Wow.
So the videos led to an actual vote in the Congress.
Wild.
Because Obama was an attorney. So they were trying to distance himself from this group.
Sure.
It was remarkable.
Sure.
I mean, at a very young age, Andrew Breitbart told me, James, you just took the elevator to the penthouse of media. You're on the Daily Show with Jon Stewart. And by the way, Jon Stewart, relatively moderate compared to today's comedians. He lampooned the left 35% of the time.
Yeah, there's this weird thing called civilization about being civil. I mean, that's obviously what it's about, right? And like underneath that civil layer are all of these horrors that the left commits. There's horrors that the right commits that are different, gross horrors that they commit, but really, the engine of horrors has been the left for at least the last. Since 1969, since they they did 1,000 things. I don't have time to go into it, but it's like people would never believe that would happen in a civil society. Like regular, 501c3 workers are helping a pimp.
Yeah, Andrew Breitbart called it the Abu Ghraib of the Great Society from the 1960s, and I think this is really the heart of it, is you catch people on tape doing things and saying things that they're not willing to publicly acknowledge. And that goes to shame. And the question is, can you shame the devil? And some people say, you cannot.
You can shame his workers,
That's what I wanted to ask you. Can you shame the devil? Now, the IRS story this week, this guy's running away. People say, your work doesn't matter. If my work doesn't matter, then why is he running? He's running from something. He's running from himself. He's running because he's embarrassed. Well, why is he embarrassed? Why not be proud that the IRS is targeting innocent people?
I mean, I think you can absolutely shame the devil in the sense that shame is an emotion projected by others onto an individual. So there's a scripture that says, like, you'll see how small and pathetic he is at the last days, like at the end of the time. It's like everyone will be like, what a joke! Like that's shameful for that. But the left gets shamed. Like you expose people, we see what they're doing, and everybody says, how horrific is that person? Is that organization? Is that entity? And you're doing with Pfizer. You're doing it all over the place, which is why I'm so glad Steven Saldana works for you.
It was very, very much so. But those people, you're right. We look at that and go, that's horrible that you would use artificial intelligence to target innocent people and destroy their lives.
Yes.
But they look at, here's my experience, they're like, we need to make sure that nothing gets recorded. They're focused on it not being exposed. The devil is focused on it not being exposed. I find that so interesting.
It's incredible that darkness proliferates. Light exposes. God's always light. The devil's always darkness. It's always about exposure. If you're doing righteous deeds, you don't need to hide them.
In your area, West Village, I won't say where, but down the street, the restaurant owner, I've never seen this before. In 20 years of doing this, was so, he must have, I guess, recognized me, or maybe it's spiritual, and he knew that I was on a journey there. He grabbed my phone. I said, sir, what are you doing? I'm eating dinner. He said, what's on your phone? They're obsessed with preventing, controlling.
Absolutely.
They're not even thinking.
Absolutely.
They can't even fathom the notion that there's a government agent doing something wrong. They can't even acknowledge the thought of it.
Yeah, because darkness, it has to use subtlety to grow in power in a society. It's like it says in Genesis chapter 3, it says the snake was the subtlest beast of the field. So his movement is almost imperceptible. If you perceive what he's doing, you'll stomp on his head. You know what I'm saying? But if you can't perceive it, then they can win. And that's been the game over and over and over again.
And they're definitely afraid of being exposed. And and I know, we all know, that judges are, and the Attorney General here in the state of New York are very political. And in the pillow talk, and in the locker room, and the whispers to each other, they're like, let's get that guy.
And they're incentivized by their friends, because they're like, I want to be the top judge, so if I do this, all of my judges' friends are going to vote me up, and so I'm incentivized to break the law.
But they don't want to be caught saying it. And that's, I'm an optimist, and I believe that light wins the day.
Yes.
That these efforts to suppress the truth it's like rock beats scissors.
Here's the other thing, James. A little tiny bit of light drastically changes a dark room. And even that single conversation, like those little things are changing the whole environment.
I think so.
You don't need a bonfire. I mean, we hope to have one day.
Yes.
But just the match.
Just the spark.
Yes.
And other people go, oh, I can do that, or and they start to say that's possible.
Yep.
But I think this whole concept of shame is fascinating. And I read a lot of journalism textbooks. I'm about to go to the Socrates in the City event, and all of the old textbook, the old gumshoe tobacco chewing
yeah.
reporters with the fedora. They would all say, our job is to shame the devil.
Wow.
That's what they said their job was.
Wow.
To shame, to quote, knock the bleeding crap out of the people who are corrupting this country. To shame the devil, because journalism is about morality.
Wow.
It's about a shared sense of morality.
Wow.
Journalists.
Hey, let's get some OMG T-shirts that say "Shame the Devil."
Stephen?
I know, Stephen. He's downstairs.
Saldana.
I'm serious. Wouldn't that be awesome?
That's actually a really good idea.
Yeah.
That's a
for sure.
really
I
good,
know.
I don't know what the graphic is, but
I don't know.
the text.
Yeah. We'll get the guy. We'll get the right guy to do it.
Shame the devil.
I mean, that's a killer. That should be the James O'Keefe T-shirt.
That
literally.
should be the motto of OMG, to be honest.
It should be. Yeah.
Shame the devil.
Yeah. Isn't that a great idea?